Fear turned killer. The true story of Delhi's Monkey Man panic. A dark stats and facts story. In the scorching summer of 2001, something stalked the rooftops of Delhi. But the real monster wasn't what people thought they saw in the darkness. It was what their minds created from shadows and suggestion. Picture this. It's 2 a.m. in East Delhi. The power has been out for hours, as usual during the rolling blackouts. The temperature still hovers around 35 degrees Celsius. You're sleeping on your rooftop to escape the suffocating heat trapped in your tiny apartment below. Then you hear it, screaming from the next building. Someone shouts one word that will change everything: Monkey Man. What followed was one of the most bizarre cases of mass hysteria ever documented. According to data from the Delhi Police Control Room, 397 people would call claiming attacks over just 15 days. The Institute of Human Behavior and Allied Sciences would examine 51 victims with physical injuries. 3 people would die, not from any creature's claws, but from the terror itself. Here's what makes this story truly dark. Forensic analysis would later reveal that 88% of the attack wounds showed patterns consistent with accidental self-infliction. The monster was real, but it existed in a different dimension than anyone expected. The collective unconscious of a city under extreme stress. Tonight, we examine 3 disturbing truths about what happens when fear becomes contagious, when poverty meets panic, and when the human mind becomes its own worst enemy. Chapter 1. When Fear Literally Kills. Meet Ramesh Kumar, a 25-year-old labourer living in Noida. On the night of May 15, 2001, he was sleeping on his rooftop when he heard commotion from the street below. Neighbours were shouting about the Monkey Man being spotted nearby. In the darkness, Ramesh saw what he thought was a figure approaching across the adjacent rooftop. Without a second thought, he ran. The problem: there was nowhere to run to. Ramesh fell 4 stories to his death. The figure he saw, most likely another terrified resident, also running. This wasn't an isolated incident. In Ghaziabad, a pregnant woman named Shanti Devi heard her neighbours screaming that the Monkey Man was in their building. Racing down the unlit stairwell, she missed a step and tumbled down an entire flight. She and her unborn child died from the injuries. What makes this particularly tragic is what investigators found. There was no evidence anyone in that building had actually seen anything. The panic had spread purely through sound, screams echoing through thin walls, creating a cascade of terror. But here's where the psychology gets truly dark. Dr. Nimesh Desai's team at the Institute of Human Behavior discovered something chilling when examining the victims. Every single person who claimed to have fought off the creature showed defensive wounds on the outer part of their forearms, not the inner part where you'd expect if you were grabbing something trying to escape. The only explanation: these people had scratched themselves, unconsciously creating physical evidence of an attack that never happened. The death certificates tell a stark story. Official cause of death: fall from height during panic reaction. Not murder, not animal attack. Pure crystallized fear that overrode every survival instinct these people had. According to research published in the Indian Journal of Medical Sciences, between May 10th and 25th, 2001, at least 3 people died directly from panic responses to the Monkey Man sightings, with dozens more suffering serious injuries from falls, stampedes, and self-harm during episodes of acute anxiety. Chapter 2. The mob becomes the monster. While some ran from shadows, others turned violent against anything that moved. On May 18th, a van driver named Mohammed Iqbal was passing through East Delhi when his vehicle broke down. As he stepped out to check the engine, someone shouted that they'd spotted the Monkey Man. Within minutes, a mob had surrounded him. They beat him with sticks, stones, whatever they could find. By the time police arrived, Iqbal had multiple fractures and internal bleeding. He survived, barely. But Muhammad wasn't the only victim of misidentification. A 4-foot-tall Hindu holy man, a sadhu who had taken a vow of silence, was walking through Ghaziabad when residents decided his small stature and unkempt appearance matched the monkey man's description. Unable to speak to defend himself, he was beaten unconscious. The irony. Many of the attackers later admitted they'd never actually seen the creature. They were acting on descriptions they'd heard third or fourth hand. The violence revealed something disturbing about group psychology. Dr. S.K. Verma's analysis found that 67% of the mob violence victims were outsiders to the communities where they were attacked. People who looked different, spoke different languages, or simply weren't recognized. The monkey man had become a projection screen for existing social tensions. One shopkeeper, interviewed weeks later, admitted, "We knew it probably wasn't really the monkey man, but everyone was so angry, so scared, someone had to pay." This admission exposes the dark truth. The mobs weren't really hunting a monster. They were exercising their own fears through violence against convenient scapegoats. The Delhi police documented at least 12 cases of serious assault due to mistaken identity during the monkey man panic, with victims requiring extensive hospitalization. Not one of these attacks resulted in the capture of any unusual creature. Chapter 3: Poverty's Psychological Prison. Perhaps the most revealing statistic comes from the demographic analysis. 94% of reported monkey man victims came from the poorest sections of East Delhi. These weren't random numbers. They painted a picture of vulnerability that goes beyond economics. Saroj Sharma, a domestic worker, lived in a single room with 6 family members in Chaprola. No electricity after 10 p.m. due to rolling blackouts. No fans in 40-degree heat. Everyone slept on the roof or in the streets. When she reported being attacked by the monkey man on May 10th, investigators found something telling. Her injuries exactly matched the rusted edge of the water tank on her building's roof, the same tank she'd have passed in the darkness while fleeing. The poor weren't just financially vulnerable, they were psychologically primed for this exact type of mass hysteria. Research showed that 89% of victims had less than primary school education. They worked jobs with no security, day labourers, rickshaw drivers, domestic workers. They lived in areas where actual monkeys regularly ransacked homes for food. The line between real and imagined threats had already been blurred by daily survival stress. Dr. Desai's team discovered that incidents clustered in specific patterns. They peaked between midnight and 3 a.m., exactly when power cuts were scheduled. They occurred most frequently in areas with population densities exceeding 20,000 per square kilometre. The attacks followed the path of the electricity grid's rolling blackouts almost perfectly. One detail stands out from the police reports. Not a single victim from Delhi's wealthy South Extension or Defence Colony areas reported seeing the monkey man, despite these neighbourhoods being less than 10 kilometres from the epicentre of sightings. They had generators. They had air conditioning. They slept safely inside. The monster, it seems, only hunted those who couldn't afford to escape the heat. The state government eventually agreed to suspend rolling blackouts in some of the poorest areas. The sightings dropped by 90% within 48 hours. The correlation was undeniable. The monkey man thrived in darkness and desperation. According to the final analysis by the Indian Journal of Medical Sciences, every single one of the 51 medically examined victims shared 3 characteristics: low income, disrupted sleep due to heat, and residents in areas experiencing frequent power failures. Closing note. The monkey man of Delhi was never caught because it was never a single entity to catch. It was a collective nightmare born from the intersection of poverty, power failures, and psychological pressure. The real monster was the conditions that made 400 million Indians vulnerable to such hysteria. 3 people died running from nothing. Dozens were hospitalized after being beaten by their neighbors. Hundreds inflicted wounds upon themselves in their sleep and blamed a creature that existed only in the space between fear and exhaustion. The Delhi police officially closed the case on June 19, 2001, concluding that mass hysteria and self-inflicted injuries during panic explained all documented incidents. But the conditions that created the monkey man, overcrowding, poverty, infrastructure failure, remain. Somewhere tonight, in another overheated slum, in another city under stress, the next panic is already forming in the shadows. Stay curious but safe.